Hello everyone, this is Chris Jamel at Exciton Interactive, and in this video we are going to create the configuration file that we'll use to tell Webpack how to transpile our TypeScript, CSS or SCSS, and Pug files. Before we begin, I do want to remind you that you can find a link to the article for this video in the description below, as well as we do need to make possible correction from the previous video. So depending on how you import or install your packages from npm, we may have installed the incorrect version of a package. So to check that, I'm going to go to the package.json file. What we're looking for is the Uglify.js Webpack plugin. If the version of that plugin is the 1.0 beta 3 version, then we're good to go. If it is, on the other hand, 0.4.6 or another version, then we need to make an update. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on Web UI and choose Open Folder in File Explorer. The reason I'm doing that is that I need a console at the root of our project. And what we need to do is first uninstall the package. So we'll say npm, and it helps if you put the command uninstall and -- save, and I'll go ahead and do that. So that'll uninstall the plugin. Next we need to reinstall or install the correct version, and we can specify the version, so we can do npm install, the name of the plugin, name of the package, and at the end we'll type @ and the version we want is 1.0.0-beta.3. If we hit enter, that will install the correct version of the plugin. So again, if you already had the 1.0 beta 3 version installed, you do not need to go through this process. You're good to go. I'm going to clear this. We're going to need the console later. We made a change to the package.json file that was open in Visual Studio outside of Visual Studio. So we can either say yes or yes to all. We only had the one file, so we'll just say yes. And we can close the package.json. Now we're ready to create our configuration file. So we're going to right-click on Web UI, choose Add New Item, and it's a JavaScript file. The name of that file is webpack.config.js. We're going to click Add. And that will open our file for us. So the first thing that we need to do is import a few packages and variables to our configuration file. We'll do that. Oops. Copy, paste. So the first thing we have here is the environment variable. So that's going to be set to the value of a node variable, and that's contained within the process env node env. We're going to set that ourselves when we invoke Webpack. It'll either be development or production. In case we forget, it'll default to development. We're going to use auto prefixer to apply vendor prefixes to our CSS. Webpack comes bundled with a few plugins that we're going to need. The bundle analyzer plugin will create or will show us a visual representation of our bundle. So show us what modules or what files are contributing what amount to the size of our bundle. The extract text plugin we use to extract our CSS from JavaScript to create a CSS bundle. So what Webpack does is it will take, so for instance, if we have the SCSS file for a page, what will happen is we'll import that into Webpack. It will apply a loader, a Sass loader, which will convert that to CSS. We'll apply auto prefixer to that. And then what would typically happen is that CSS would get converted to a string and then embedded within the JavaScript bundle. But of course, if it's a style sheet for a page, we do not want it to be included in a JavaScript bundle. We want it to be in a CSS bundle. So the extract text plugin will pull it out and create a CSS bundle for it. And then we have the Uglify.js plugin, which will run during a production build which we'll use to minify our output, doing things like extract or removing comments, mangling variable names, that kind of thing. So that takes care of our importing. Next, we need to specify the entry point for Webpack. So where should Webpack start in building our bundles? So we do that by creating an object, cleverly called entry. And that object has two properties, a main property and a vendor property. So the main property is set to the output of this function. So typically, if it's a page, there will be a site or a CSS file and a JavaScript file for that page. So what I'm done here is sort of create a helper function that says the site scripts and styles takes in, so it's a function here, takes in a name and outputs an array. That array has two values. The two values are strings, so they're results of invoking these functions. So the site scripts function takes a name and gives us a relative path, which is a folder, the app folder within the source folder, and the file it will be looking for will have name.site.ts. So for instance, in this one, it'll have main passed in, so it'll look for main.site.ts. Similarly, it will look for main.site.scss in the Sass folder. And then the vendor property, of course, the vendor TS file, there are no styles associated with it, so it's just the path, relative path to the vendor TS file. So now, since we've specified this site scripts and styles function and we've passed in main, Webpack will be looking for that main.site.ts file and main.site.scs file. So we'll create them now. So we'll go to our source folder, go to the app folder, right click on app, choose add new item, and it'll be a TypeScript file, which will be main.site.ts. And this will just contain one line of dummy code, and of course it has to be something involving hello world. So once our bundle is created, if we look in the browser, in the console window of the browser, we will see, or should see, a message hello world. So we'll save and close that. Next, we need to create our style sheet. So we'll go to the Sass folder, right click, choose add new item. Its name again, main.site.scss. This one, on the other hand, helps if you don't create another TypeScript file within our Sass directory. So we'll rename that quickly. Yes, I like to change. And open that. Now we're good to go. So the first thing we're going to do is import a CSS reset, and included in the npm install from the previous video was the reset normalize.css. So we're going to include that. Next, just like the bourbon and neat folders, there is a file inside of our base folder called _base, which imports all of the contents of the base folder, or it would had I remembered that we created our media queries file. So you can either put this import inside of the base folder, or you can do it here. So I'm importing the media queries. We may or may not use it in this file anyway. The reason this will work is that this is the only time that we will import the entire contents of the base folder. At no other point will we import this. We will import different files from within the base folder, such as the media queries, and one other file, which is inside the base folder. There is a file called _variables. If we open that file, we will see that we have this little squiggly error here. This is telling us that the font stack system variable is not defined. That variable is defined within a file inside the bourbon folder. So what we're going to do, so if we try to build our bundles now with this, we would get an error. We're going to import the bourbon neat folder, neat file that we created last time, and that will make our error go away. Close that. So that is the entire contents of the main.site.scss file for now. So we can save and close that. So we specify the entry point here. Next, we need to specify the output, or at least the output for JavaScript. So we're creating an object called output, has a file name, telling it to output to the www.root/js folder. The name will be passed in by Webpack, which is the property name on the entry object. So this will create a bundle called main.bundle.js. Path info set to true will cause Webpack to include comments within the bundle. Those comments will help us if we need to debug, because it will show in the module the name of the file where the code came from. So for instance, there will be a comment in there that says main.site.ts, so that we can find the contents of that particular file. If this is an environment, if this is a production build, we want the bundle name to be .min.js, and we do not want to include that path info information, so we'll set it to false. So that takes care of the output for JavaScript. Now we'll deal with configuring our plugins. So the first plugin here we have is the Common Chunks plugin. What it will do is extract the code that is common to all of our files and create a file on its own, and that will be the vendor file that we discussed earlier. Next we have again the Extract Text plugin. The configuration for it is we're saying the file name is equal to, so if it's a production build, well, first off, either one, it will output the result to the www.root/css, again, name passed in. So for our first instance will be the main. And if it's a production build, it will be called .min.css and just CSS if it's a development build. Of course, we want the plugin to be enabled, so we'll say disable false, and we do not want it to extract everything from all chunks. We just want what's coming from the particular chunk that it's working on. The loader options plugin we're going to use to apply auto prefixer using a loader called PostCSS, and so that's the only thing it's doing for now. Next we have the define plugin, which is a way to pass in information to the bundles that may not have been, or they would not have access to. For example, there's no node environment within the bundle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the value of the node environment, stringifies, string already, and we're going to create a object using the define plugin called the process.env. So we're mimicking the node environment variable, and we're going to set its node environment to the result. Now again, if this is a production build, we want to include the Uglify.js plugin. So Uglify will help us to minify our bundles even more. It's going to mangle variable names. We're going to keep the function names. If Uglify finds code that it can't reach, we are not interested in hearing any warnings about it, so we're going to set false, warnings to false. The output should contain no comments, so we'll set false. And again, the bundle analyzer will see the result of the bundle analyzer at the end. So now we're ready to actually export our configuration object. So at the end here, we just say module.exports an object. It has property entry set to entry, output to output, plugins to plugins. And then we have this module object, which contains a rules array. The rules array is the way that we tell Webpack how to deal with particular files. And those rules contain a test, which is a regular expression on the file name. So for the first one, if the Webpack encounters a file that ends in .ts, so a TypeScript file, excluding anything from the node modules, it will apply these loaders to it. In this case, we have one. We're using the TS loader. So the TS loader will take the file. It will invoke the TypeScript compiler on that file, convert it to JavaScript, and then Webpack will embed that JavaScript into our bundle. And then next, we have files that end in .pug. So Pug, was formerly known as Jade, is a templating language that we're going to use when creating our Angular component templates. Again, we'll exclude node modules. We'll apply the Pug HTML loader to it, which will convert the Pug to HTML. We will then take that HTML and apply the raw loader to it, which will convert it to a string, and then Webpack will embed that string into our JavaScript bundle. Next, we'll deal with the Sass files. So if it encounters a file that says .component.scss, that means this is the naming convention that I have for style sheets that belong to Angular components. Again, ignoring node modules, in this case Bourbon, Neat, and Base as well. It will apply the Sass loader, converts it to CSS. Next, you'll pass it to the post-CSS loader, which uses auto prefixer. Raw loader will convert that to a string, and Webpack will put that in the JavaScript bundle. Next, if it encounters a file that ends in .site.scss, we're going to use the extract text plugin. First, we'll do the Sass loader, then the post-CSS loader, then the CSS loader. Webpack, or the extract text plugin, will then pull that out of the JavaScript and put it into the CSS bundle that we defined before. If something fails, it'll attempt to use the style loader. So that takes care of our webpack.config.js. So we'll save and close that. Now if we try to use that, Webpack would throw an error. And the reason is that the post-CSS loader requires a configuration file of its own. So we're going to return to the root of our project. We're going to right-click on Web UI, choose Add New Item. It's also a JavaScript file. It will be named postcss.config.js, and we're going to click Add. This file is actually very small. Only job here right now is to tell it to post-CSS loader to use auto prefixer. It takes care of that. Now, if we invoke Webpack, it would create our bundles just fine, except we have no way of invoking Webpack at the moment. So we're going to do that using npm. So we'll open our package.json file. So if we look in that file, we'll see a scripts object. That object contains a test property. So anything contained within the scripts object are commands that we can use npm to run. So for example, since we already have the test, if we go back to our console, and we type in npm run test, we will see the error, no test specified. If we go back, we see error, no test specified, and we have received an error because it exited with code 1. Excuse me. So what we need to do is to include different commands in our scripts object. So let's do that. So the commands I've included are 3. So we have a build, :production, and watch. Each of those commands set the node environment to, in the case of build and watch, they set to development. In the build: production, sets it to production. Each of them invoke Webpack. Each of them pass in this --progress flag, which simply outputs more information in the console while Webpack is creating the bundle. In the production build, we have this -p flag, which tells Webpack to do some minification of its own. And in the watch command, we have --watch, which will then cause Webpack to watch our files. So it'll first build the bundles, and then if we make a correction or a modification to any of the files, it will recreate the bundle that file belongs to. So we'll save package.json, close. Now we'll return back to our console. Let's go ahead and clear the screen. And I actually want to create a second one. So in this first, we're going to type npm run build. So that will build our development bundle. In this one, we're going to type npm run build: production. And we will go back up to our development build. We can see that it succeeded. Created 3 bundles. main.bundle.js, vendor.bundle.js, and main.bundle.css. So we can see vendor bundle is very, very large. So now what we want to do is to test to actually make sure that those bundles work. So let's return to Visual Studio. I'm going to choose debug, start without debugging. Once Visual Studio builds the project, it will open it in a web browser. So this is what we should see. If you hit either F12 or inspect, it'll open the console. And in the console window, we see our hello world statement. So our bundles are being created correctly. And again, the production bundle is done, and you can see here, this is the result of the bundle analyzer plugin running. So it shows us that the biggest chunk of our bundle is Angular, of course. Then we have RxJS, Core.js, Web Animations, Lodash Zone. Very confident that we'll be able to decrease the size of our bundle. So if we want to look at the output of creating our production build, so we went from 4.3 megabytes down to 1.17 megabytes in the production build. No doubt we'll be able to reduce that even more once we can reduce the size of, say, RxJS, maybe Core.js. We're going to hold off on doing that until we actually have some Angular components built so that we can test to make sure that what we're reducing it by isn't breaking anything. But as a preview of what we're going to do, Lodash is being included simply because we want it. And if we look, we're importing the entire library, which is about 70 kilobytes. Okay? So we can reduce the size of that. So we can go in to Visual Studio. We're going to go back to our vendor.ts file. And we're going to change, so the import Lodash statement here is how we're bringing in Lodash. And again, that brings in the entire library. So if we change this to Lodash/each, that will then import only the each function from Lodash. And to test to make sure that that is working, I'm going to modify, let's go back here. We're going to modify the main.site.ts file that we have. And so we'll copy and paste. So what we're doing here is importing the Lodash/each function. We're naming it each. And what I'm going to do is pass in an array of 2 string values to the each function and just output to the console those strings. So we'll save that file, return to our console, and we're going to recreate our development build, and we're going to recreate, first the bundle analyzer opens a web server. So we just need to hit Control-C a couple of times to close the web server, and now we can run the production bundle again, production build. So if we return to our browser, we can go back to the page. If we hit refresh, we will see that we have Hello World still printing, but now we also print test1 and test2, which means that we have correctly imported the each function from Lodash. And we'll give our production build a moment to finish. Like I said, it takes a bit more time than the development building. So again, let's see, we're going to go, or attempt to go. So Lodash consisted of almost 70 kilobytes of information. This is the new build. And if we go down, Lodash is now down here. And with just the each function now consists of 5 kilobytes or thereabouts. And so this will be the process that we'll use in dealing with minifying, say, RxJS. And again, we're going to do that once we have Angular component or 2 created so that we make sure that we aren't breaking anything. But for now, we have configured Webpack to transpile all of our TypeScript, Sass and Pug files. So next video, we'll actually be able to do some programming as opposed to copy and pasting. So we'll talk to you later.